These are my thoughts on Slitterhead. Let's get into it. So first and foremost, I always like to talk about the gameplay for a game I'm reviewing, and honestly the gameplay here is pretty good. Definitely is a little bit lacking. There's not a whole lot of variety to the combat moves here, but the whole premise of the game is that you're kind of possessing civilians and rarities, which are like civilians with like advanced abilities, so you might have a different weapon set for a rarity when you possess them. And it's definitely satisfying when you're using the abilities, but as far as like just regular melee attacks, it's pretty bare bones. I think the developers could have done a little bit more here to kind of spice it up, but overall I enjoyed it. It's gory. I liked taking civilians and make them into bombs and then making them run into the bad guys and just kind of having them blow up and do a little bit extra damage. There's also abilities where you can poison the Slitterheads, which is what the bad guys are called. My only other complaint about the combat and gameplay is that there wasn't a whole lot of variety to the enemy types. I probably went about 8 or 9 hours before I really saw a different type of Slitterhead. For the most part, the bosses, but prior to that, were pretty much just color swaps with the same move sets, slight changes here and there. But yeah, that part kind of disappointed me because I know the director behind this was actually behind the original Silent Hill, and I feel like those games are pretty well known for their monster design. So I was a little bit surprised not to see a whole lot of variety there. But outside of the combat, the gameplay was pretty interesting. There are actually a lot of different things going on in this game. They really try to do a lot with the mechanics, as far as like there being some sort of stealth mechanics to it. There are missions where you do have to sneak around and not get caught. And there are also parts of the game where you have to grapple onto signs to get onto a roof, to get to a different part to complete a mission. So that was interesting. I was a little bit surprised to see that. I don't remember seeing that in any of the gameplay previews that I saw, but I obviously could have missed them. I don't see everything here, right? But it was still enjoyable. Like I said, just like the combat, still a little bit bare bones. I think if the developers had more time to fine tune it, it could have been something like exponentially better. I really hope they come out with a sequel for this and just like fine tune all of the things that they were trying to do here, because it was a lot of really cool ideas. They just needed to be a little bit more fleshed out, you know. So the gameplay, it wasn't anything that's going to blow my mind, but I was still happy with it. As far as the story goes, pretty straightforward. You play as an entity known as Night Owl, who possesses like civilians and rarities and kind of uses them. You're solving this big story here. It starts off with Night Owl trying to like remember who the hell he is and what he's supposed to do, and you kind of throughout the game you're like, whoa, am I a good guy or a bad guy? Like, it's definitely a weird concept. I'm not going to speak too much on the story because I do want people to experience it for themselves, but it was still enjoyable. I mean, like I always say, I typically play games for the gameplay. The story's fun, but the gameplay really has to drag me in to really make me want to play it, and I think this game overall succeeded in that. They did make some interesting choices with like the level design here. I think especially in the first 9 hours of the game, there was not a lot of variety in the level design. I mean, you're pretty much in the same area, just with like different neon signs. I did like the color palette they chose for this game. There was like some interior levels that I went into at some point. So it was like, okay, here's a little bit of a different area, but nothing was ever like, there wasn't a huge difference in like what they looked like. Like I said, sometimes you're inside, you were outside, but as far as color palette goes, they pretty much stuck to the same ideas here, which is not the worst thing for me. I'm just used to playing like bigger games that have like different biomes and different areas, you know what I mean? The part that I weirdly actually liked the most was the music. It just had like an interesting vibe to it, very thriller style music, something that's kind of trippy to listen to. All right, so overall, I'd say Slitterhead was a pretty good game. I think if the developers had more time and maybe make a sequel, they could flesh out a lot of the cool ideas here, because the gameplay was pretty fun. I liked the combat. Again, a little bit bare bones. I'll give them that on the melee. Not really anything that's going to blow your mind, but the abilities were pretty cool. And I did like kind of possessing other like civilians, like especially when you get into a tight spot, you know, possess another civilian, and then you can kind of like you distract a Slitterhead with that guy for a while and then go back to the person you want to play as, which was a really cool mechanic. The abilities were fun. The traversal wasn't anything that's going to blow your mind, but it definitely felt like they were trying to do something here, and I think they kind of succeeded in what they were going for. I wish there was a little bit more variety to the level design and the enemy design. I think that was the biggest thing that kind of bummed me out. Was like, oh, another one of these, you know. But yeah, overall, still a pretty great game. I would recommend it to anybody who wants to play a game that's not very long. Again, I clocked in like 15 hours. It's not an expensive game. And it kind of took me back to like when I was a kid and I was just playing gaming ass games. Like I want to say it reminded me a little bit of the prototype games. Obviously not on that like grandiose of a scale, but if you took that game and kind of broke it down to the bare bones, that's kind of what it reminded me of. So let me know what you guys think, man. Check it out. Peace.